Welcome to Eviliv3, the live media commentary show that answers the question, why women scare certain men. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, because today we are going to review The Handmaid's Tale, a novel. That's right. I have glasses. Deal with it. This is written by Margaret Atwood, published by Vintage in March 16th, 1998. So it's been out there for a while. I have not seen the show, the series that was developed based off this. I didn't know anything about this, and I didn't really want to, but I had some really good friends tell me that I should definitely read it so that I could at least understand what the hell they're talking about with my wife over a dinner conversation. So I read it. It's a good thing that it's about the size of every other pulp novel, like 300 pages, because this was a bit of a slog to get through. And I'm not entirely sure why. My initial thoughts about this novel were, how did this get published? Like, there's just like, where there should be punctuation, it's none. Where you would, sort of give visual cues about when someone's going to jump into the past or the future or stay in the present or have conversations, or they said, she said, I said. Usually there's some sort of like visual indicator through punctuation or formatting. That was wholly absent throughout most of this novel. And then randomly it just started appearing again. The first person narrative was slipping a lot, and it felt very strange. It was all framed except for the very, very last chapter, which is set way further in the future as like a sort of a discovery of this novel. Like it was the Blair Witch Project or something. They found tapes that were ostensibly the novel that you read, and they're sort of examining them after what has happened and sort of recorrected itself. So it's like a historical review of a moment in time. So it'd be like us looking back on January 6th and going, oh, wasn't that shitty? That was fucked up. What were those idiots thinking? That type of thing. Except infinitely more horrible shit happened than in January 6th. And people died there, so you can imagine how bad it was. I don't know. I was expecting something better. I really was. I was expecting something to like blow me away, to move me. But I don't know, man. I've sort of cut my teeth on sci-fi, like dystopian sci-fi specifically, by like Children of Men, which is a very similar overarching narrative, which is infinitely better. Just executed infinitely better. So I was just surprised. All right, that being said. It's a future dystopian novel set in a near future New England in a patriarchal, totalitarian, theonomic state known as the Republic of Gilead, which has overthrown the United States government. Offred is the central character and a narrator and one of the handmaids, women who are forcibly assigned to produce children for the commanders, who are the ruling class in Gilead. So the history is never like outright, this is A to B to C in a linear fashion. It's all the handmaid, Offred, narrating things in her moment, sharing her experience. And then every once in a while, she'll give a glimpse about how things were with her mom, or how things were with the world, or how the organization overthrew things and how she saw it. This is a very much supposed to be a first-person account of events. It's just not reliable. And so that's where I have a bit of frustration. And we've had like a bazillion dystopian novels out there. So when you want to sort of dive into a new dystopian novel, you want something, well, novel in it. You want something to stand out. This whole idea of subjugating women is... that's Abrahamic Religion 101. That's as old as Earth, full stop. Like as soon as you had Jews and Islam and Christians in existence, it is them being terrified of women and trying to control everything about them. And then women being fucking retarded enough to go along with it. It's stunning. So it's not like this has a new and novel approach to the dystopian fantasy. It's always been there. It's religion. It's real world. And I think maybe that is why people connect with this story so much, is because this is real world slightly to the right. Like if Donald Trump gets elected a second term, we could very, very well be here with Project 2025. Like this is not that far from reality. women going back. Because let's also remember, the women's suffragette movement was not that terribly long ago. It is within our cultural memory. And so women have already been suppressed. I think it was like the mid 70s when they actually finally got the right to have their own bank account. Yeah. So women having any semblance of actual freedom is a very modern idea because it has not historically been a thing that they've been afforded by men, which is why, that's why so many damn women don't like men. I get it. I'm not going to shame you for it. I understand it. I would be pissed too. And like the other side of this is like, I want to like this because I want to be upset on the women in my life's behalf, like raised by a mother and 3 sisters and, like a wife and a daughter. And I want, I'm one of those guys who is not afraid of women at all. And I think women should be strong enough to stand up to the strongest men and call us on our bullshit. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It helps keep us in check as dudes. And so whenever I run across someone who is a little intimidated by women or women who are surprised by, this sort of tale where men are terrified, it's like, no, that's what Abrahamic religions breed. Fear in women. They should be controlled and subjugated, and they should have no rights unless they're the ones that you give them. That's the Christian, Jewish, Islamic culture. That is not like a natural way of being. And I know like there's a lot of sort of shitty humans out there who are like, well, it's always been that way, so isn't that the natural thing? No. The natural thing is to stand up to each other, celebrate our strengths and our weaknesses, and whomever your partner happens to be, find some semblance of balance with them. It's not to have one on top of the other or more important than the other unless you're talking about sex, in which case then it's an ebb and flow type deal. Hey, Chris, how you doing, man? The story premise reminds you a little bit of Children of Men, which was an amazing movie. It was stunning. That's my favorite sci-fi movie of all time. I love it so much. And it's beautiful to watch too. But I'm not talking about that. I gotta stop. So I was a little bit disappointed in this. And really, the strength of this novel is in its individual interpretive narrative, right? So it's not truth, it's not fact, it's not reality, it's not even really trustworthy at all. Because we're led into the story thinking that, oh, this is her experiencing this first person. And then we immediately come to terms with, oh no, this is her recalling what happened to her. And I mean, eyewitness account isn't even held up in a court of law in most cases. So hearing a story of someone after it's already happened to them, who knows how long ago, is wildly untrustworthy. You just can't, it's not something that you can just believe wholeheartedly. And so we're immediately set off on a tale of saying, no, you can't take every word for this as gospel. And if you can't believe the narrator, then what the hell are you reading it for? Like, what's the purpose of this? Just to say guys suck? Because that is very much, and I know that's very destructive to the overarching narrative of this story, but that's the message that it's sending. Men are horrible, and here's the catch. You may not be able to guess this, but I probably think since you've lived in this world a little while, you will be able to. Women are worse. Women go along with this type of bullshit society, and then rather than standing up to the men and overthrowing them and using their own power, which they have power, if you as a woman are watching this and you don't think you actually have any power, sweetheart, you need to read The Satanic Witch, because you have all of the power, full stop. And we saw that with the primary character in this novel in a lot of different scenes where she started realizing that she had power and that she could exercise that power over those of authority. And in that aspect, if I could just isolate that note, I would say that this would be a wonderful tale about a woman realizing her authority and exercising it, and I would celebrate that. But that's not what this is. This is her realizing her power, and then other women shutting her down. And so it's not an affirmation. It's reality. It's high school. It's Mean Girls, which is a great film and probably a great musical, but not a great story when you're talking about the overarching scheme of how women treat other women. And it stuns me when we have this culture of women saying how bad men are, and yet they're worse to each other. They don't stand up for each other. Certainly not in any religious organization that are very much presented in this novel, but also in our own real life world that we can, have a bazillion examples of. It's shocking to me. Like, they could literally control the world if they could just get past their own stupid shit. I don't understand how guys run the world, and we're full of shit. So what? That tells you how fucked up the women to women culture is when they can't even support each other. But that's what you see in this. And that maybe is why it's so frustrating to me, because while the women who raised me did not get along at all, and I just saw how mean they could be to each other, so much more than they were ever to me. And ultimately, the moments where they truly support each other are so few and far between that they're special, that you remember them. They stand out. That sort of thing should not stand out, especially in this frame that they are all subjugated by men, or men are just all pushing them down in some way or another. Okay, well then be better. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's what the real question should be. It shouldn't be, hey, let me write a novel telling you how bad men are. We already know that. It should be, how can women be better? And that's not what this was. And that's what really frustrates me. Like, I don't know. I expected more. Does this novel closely align with the TV show? No idea. Never watched it. Never seen a frame of it. Well, that's not true. I've seen a trailer for it. I do like the actress that plays Offred in it, the main character of the novel. She was really great in Mad Men and The Invisible Man. I mean, really, really stunning. And she did a bunch of other stuff too that was great. But have you noticed with your daughter that it's gotten worse since? Oh yeah, women are, well, no, I don't know about worse. I think just easier to be mean, because now they have social media, and especially for girls. And that's why I refuse to allow my children in general to have any social media, because it's a stunning rise in suicide rates, in bullying rates of girls versus girls. And it allows the worst, especially in a juvenile context, to come out. And I don't want my daughter to be subjected to bullshit like that for literally no reason. If it was a positive thing, that's one thing, but it's never like that. It's like anything that is developed technological wise ends up pornographic. Anything developed communication based ends up bullying. And is that all we are as a species? Is that as good as it gets? Porn and bullying? I'll take half of it, but the other half, there's no reason for it. Like, I just don't understand. Just like, move on if you don't like someone or something. You don't have to like shit on them. Like, that says more about you. And they clearly don't care. Their brains clearly are not fully developed yet because they're kids. So that's what they do. All right. But that's the women in this. You have a cast of women of different classes, and these different women at the higher up they go in the order, the pecking order, as it were, in power structure, the more power they have, the shittier they are. And the less power they have, the cooler they are. That's literally the breakdown. And that seems to reflect real world. And so it's believable enough in this sort of a story. But is that what we're aspiring to? Like, the worst part of us? I don't know, man. And this thing won the 1985 Governor General's Award and first Arthur C. Clarke Award in 87. It was nominated for 1986 Nebula Award and the Booker Prize and the 87 Prometheus Award. In 2022, it was included in the Big Jubilee Read, a list of 70 books in Commonwealth authors, selected to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee of Elizabeth II. It was adapted into a film in the 1990s, an opera in 2000, and the television series in 2017, which is still going, I think, in its second season. I may be talking out of school there. And then there's a sequel novel, The Testament, which is published in 2019. So it's much ado about nothing, in my opinion. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah. It's frustrating because I know so many people whose taste I trust, and they like it. I'm like, what is it exactly? I don't know. It's not for me. And it's not that I'm turned off by it. Like, it's just not bad taste. No, I like the genre. It doesn't do anything at all. So here's the deal. you get the story where you think it's first person, then you quickly realize it's not first person, it's being recalled. And then you're going through this whole thing where she's recalling future, current, and past memories to try to spin this narrative about how the world ended up the way it is. And so you're like sort of pulled into this very real, very possible dystopian future. I mean, it could be like next year is really how realistic it is. And it's only horrible for women. And it's not good for men, but it's not really good now for anyone. So we don't really lose that much. And women just take this horrible stance. And so I'm just forced to like question, why would a society spin backward like that? We saw a portion of the United States populace try to overthrow a government over a failed election. Just one election ago, one election cycle. And they failed utterly. I knew they were going to fail utterly, and I didn't react strongly about it because we have a system that stands up to this type of corruption, ironically, because it was formed in a rebellion. But that's how strong of a system we have. So that could never happen. Equally, this could never happen in my mind. I know we're not that far away from it, but it could never actually fully happen because we have checks and balances, because we have the rule of law, because we have rights that are ingrained in law to protect against stuff like this. And when you have the way it happened, you have this religious organization assassinate the president and Congress, and then they seized power, took away all women's rights and subjugated women. Apparently there was some sort of like nuclear fallout, or there was some sort of like chemical that was going around that was making men sterile or women sterile. And the men said it must always be the women, but the story tells you that no, in fact, it's the men that are the sterile ones, not the women. And so, it's this whole thing of trying to repropagate the species. And they're like, we'll give control back once there's enough babies out there. You know, that sort of really shitty Abrahamic notation of fucking life and religion. Like, we'll give you power, we promise. And just that idea, we'll give you power. You sit by and just let us fuck you and shit out babies for us for a while. And when we're done, we'll give you your freedom back. And we're just supposed to believe that the culture was okay with that. That everyone was just like, yeah. And not just everyone, but like the people of power, with power, the people who are influential, they're the ones that believe that. And everyone else was just like, well, I'm too afraid to stand up to that. And they do say that there's a resistance, but it's clearly failed until the end of the novel because this is a thriving industry of subjugating women and keeping them in these little birth factory farm type things. There's no universe where everyone wouldn't be standing up and fighting back. I would be right there in line with them, armed to the teeth, struggling against it because it's the most absurd future that anyone could possibly want. I could see like a children of men scenario where it was like some natural disaster and people just could not do it. But then to take that idea and then force women to just be like breed factories, get the fuck out of here. There's no universe. And you still see women exercising their authority within those sort of, tight little confines that men have put in place. It's just not believable that there wouldn't be more men standing up. I can't imagine a world where there's not a man who looks up to women and admires them and wants them to have autonomy and authority. It's just such a foreign idea to me. You have to be an insane person, I think. I don't get it. You remember thinking on the January 11th, well, at least the guy was never got elected again. I witnessed this. Yeah, we're done. Woohoo! Dodge that bullet, right? Nope. Nope. Yeah, it's coming. And it's probably going to get nasty in certain little pockets too. Yeah, I knew what you're talking about. So the thing is, it's not all bad. The story isn't all bad. It's just the premise is frustrating. And I know it's intentionally that way. So maybe I'm just reacting to it the way it's intended to be reacted to. It's just, it gets to the point of incredulity of even possibility that I become even more frustrated with this story. But it wasn't all bad. Those moments that I had spoken of when we had Offred exercising her, or let me just say discovering the power that she actually had and then wielding it. Those were the best parts of this novel, because that's where women came from. They had to fight out of Islamic Judeo-Christian cultures to find independence. And so they had to do what she does in this novel. And so that part was believable because we've seen that in history. And I like that. My least favorite was the unbelievable parts, that you would just have men not standing up for women. Like, what about your wives or your daughters? Or that there would be enough men of power and authority to like shut all of those other men down, to force them in line. I don't believe that world exists. And I don't know if it's because I'm American and that's how my culture was carved out of the world, carving out of subjugation of one form or another. I don't know if I'm in a position of privilege that I can dream that that's a reality when there's so many other people around the world that do not have the freedoms that I have. And, they sort of think I or people like us in free countries take it for granted or don't recognize it or something. But it's one thing being born in without those freedoms and never realizing that you could stand up to them because you're taught that this is just what life is. And it's a whole nother thing to be born with all of those freedoms that we have and then to backslide and lose them all. And that's why I think it's so shocking, the whole Roe v. Wade upset that happened recently in our country, and why Republicans in the last midterm election were losing seats, because women were standing up and men were standing up with them saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I get you have your religious point of view, and that's fine. And you have every right to have that religious point of view. You don't get to tell me what I get to do. I don't follow your religion, or even if I did follow your religion, I'm not going to allow you to tell me what's right and wrong, because our Constitution says you can't. Like, that's what I love about this country, is they're fighting back when their rights are taken away. And I think that's going to be a majorly decisive point in this current election, as well it should. That, yeah, it's okay if you're a religious woman and you want to be subjugated and you want other people to tell you what your rights are, fine. That's a choice that you make for yourself. It's not a choice you make for other people or other women. They get the right to say, no, I have my own autonomy and I get to decide what's right for me. And that's how it should be, because that's what freedom looks like. It's not everyone standing in line. And that's like the huge joke of all this, because this is clearly only a right-wing world would do something like this. They always say, no, we're the party of freedom. We're the party of family. And yet they're the ones that take away the freedom. And they're the ones that force you to have families, even when you don't want to have the babies, or it was a horrific situation, or you might die in the process. And then when the baby's born, they're like, I don't give a fuck about that thing. You shouldn't have any support from our government. I know you didn't want it in the first place because you couldn't afford it, maybe. Well, now we don't give a fuck. Just take care of it and do a thing on your own. Like, where's the family then? Where's your care for the family unit then? They're the most hypocritical party, and only their type of a party could create something like The Handmaid's Tale. And it's not something that's like, oh, you're on one side and you're blaming the other side. No, this is just the reality that our life exists in right now. That only one group of people want to do something like this, and they're actively trying to do it right now in real life actively. And the rest of the world, the rest of our American society, but globally, is a sea change. We're fighting against that. So I just can't see it backsliding so much that there's not people that are, not allowing it to happen. I mean, this whole thing starts with this Japanese tourist coming into this commune with all these religious women in Northern America, sort of confined and, basically breeding factories. And they're like, are you happy? Are you okay doing this? And the whole story, the whole narrative is that she chose this to become a baby farm, which is arguably worse. That she was okay with it and she was going along with it. This was a choice that she sees that she made. And it made me immediately reflect on all the other women that are forced to cover their bodies and their faces entirely. And they're like, no, this is a choice I'm making because it's my religion. And you're like, well, okay, but let's just take a step back and think for a second. You covering up your individuality is because of your religion, and you're told to believe your religion unless you die. And so that's not really a choice anymore, is it? That's ingrained and brutalized into you. And so you look at the novel and you're like, okay, well, she's saying that this is her choice, but it's kind of been ingrained and brutalized into her that this is her only real choice, because anything else is ostensibly death through slavery, and like hard labor, because that's where they have everyone else working, and these women that are like useless and they can't breed anymore. And so it's brainwashing is what it is. Like Islamic, Judeo-Christian religions. It's brainwashing. And it's so frustrating to read about. And so maybe the novel is doing it's evoking exactly what it wants to evoke out of me, but it becomes unbelievable in my culture. And I know how absurd that sounds in the sort of state of the world we're in, but everyone I know would stand up for women if this ever tried to happen. So I just can't imagine it would ever work. So it becomes fantasy. Instead of a dystopian future, like a believable possible future, it becomes like absurdity and sort of over the top crazy. So I don't know. I had a hard time with it. And the very last chapter, again, like I had mentioned in the beginning, is just this professor giving a talk about how they found these tapes, and these tapes are a recollection, which is the novel that you just read, and it's talking about the mystery of this person and the rise and fall of the Gilead empire, and then you suddenly realize that, oh, this thing didn't last very long, and it's like it rose up, it happened for a little while, and then it fell and crumbled and went away, and then it sort of takes the gravity, the weight of the entire story, which was the subjugation of women, out entirely. Because if it only lasted a little while, which was terrible for the people that suffered underneath its regime, it was super temporary. At least it portrayed it as being super temporary. And so, yes, it was a bad moment. We've had a lot of those in our human and American history. It course corrects. I don't know. That takes the stakes out of the whole story for me when you realize that it's already over. It would have been infinitely more powerful if it ended without us knowing that Offred got away or if she died, and we don't know if the Gilead movement is still in power or not. Then you're just like, oh shit, this is horrible. But then for that, just to cut it off and just be like, no, it's over. It happened, whatever. And you're like, what the hell was this about then? What was the point of any of this? You're just like giving me a bedtime story? Is that it? Get the fuck out of here. It really should be so simple. You have the right to believe whatever you wish until your beliefs damage the rights of others. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Yes. The irony. Amen. Absolutely. That's how everyone should see life. Do whatever you want till it affects the next person, then alter it so that it doesn't. All right. So that is my review. You won't be surprised when I tell you I gave it 3 out of 5 evil eyes. This did not resonate with me. It was just a little too unbelievable and frustrating, and the grammar was so sporadically adhered to, and it was all over the place. There was no visual design cues. I mean, I'm stunned that this is as popular as it is as a novel. It must be because of the film or the series and not because of the novel, because you read this novel and it's like, this is someone who did not know what they were doing who wrote this. I mean, when you realize that it's transcriptions from a tape, that's one thing, but the person transcribing it should still use notations and grammar appropriately to convey the message. If I was listening to this on an audiobook, I would have been infuriated. Like, how do you know when it slips to the past or the future or the present? Like, because there's no cue in that case. Unless they do like a weird voice octave change or something. Like, there's no other cue for you. If there's not for reading it, then there wouldn't be for listening to it. So, I don't know. Maybe it's better because they added it into it. You like dystopian future stories, but you're right, not believable. It's hard to buy the premise. Children of Men, The Road seem scarily believable. Yeah, 100%. And I think it's because it's not a human instigative reaction. It's like a climate or a natural, something that happens naturally, The people spiral out after the catastrophe because of the reaction to the catastrophe, not that we did it to ourselves and stuff. And I understand that there are real world situations right now that go against everything I'm saying. We have North Korea as a perfect example. We have China as a perfect example of people that subjugate and shut down Islam, all of the Muslim countries in the Middle East, fucking Israel right now. Right now is doing it. So, we've got Russia doing it to Ukraine over a border crisis. Like, they want them back in the fold. We see it all over the world. And so I get that my arguments only hold any semblance of water from my perspective, because reality is saying that no, we can be this horrible to each other and it can spiral. But those places never had the freedoms that we had. And this is set in America. And that's why it's hard for me to believe. It really is. All right. Anyway, that's it for this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I do recommend you read it, because my view of it might be wildly different than yours, and you may love this novel like none other. So I always err on the side of read it for yourself. You know, that whole LeVar Burton, don't take my word for it, you know, the reading rainbow thing, encouraging you to go out there and read for yourself. I think reading is incredibly important. It's just like a page. I think it's like a 301 page or 311 pages. It's a very short novel. It's sort of that pulp novel length. It's worth it. Check it out. I didn't enjoy it the best, but you might. So that's it. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, always remember the evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there, be evil.